Hi, welcome to the show. This is Ifrah, Ifka Nolosha, usually run by podcast MURDUD and MURAAYAD via SoundCloud and iTunes podcasts. Today we switched it up a little bit and we decided to do a video interview with Ismail Mohamed. So I wanted to ask you a few questions and have a conversation with you about you, your life, your career, and political aspirations. So to start with, what is your story?
Well, thank you so much for having me. And so again, my name is Ismail Mohamed. I was born in Somalia in 1992, and our family fled, the civil war, and after that began, we fled into neighboring countries in Ethiopia and Kenya, and we lived there as refugees, and then we got an opportunity to come to the U.S. I came here at the age of 12, and I've been here ever since.
One of the biggest questions, obviously, is why are you running?
It's a lot of things. It's hard to pack it into one, but I would say that during the past several years that I've been active in the community, some of the concerns that I have seen over the years, that's what prompted me to run. And if I could list those, I would say the biggest issue is economic development. Our district, District 25, has about 31%. The average income rate is 31,000. Unemployment rate is over 10%.
Wow.
We have over 31% that are out of the workforce, that are not working.
Okay.
So I think economic development is the biggest key. And I think we drive that by having legislators who are listening to our concerns, who are providing and rechanneling funds to programs that we need, such as job training, job skills for our youth, making sure that our youth have the skills to be able to get jobs. We also need to do better on education, provide more funding in K-12 education, so that our kids are getting the best education possible to be able to assume jobs that are coming up next year. Absolutely. So I think it's a wide variety of issues, but I would say the key issues are economic development and education, and youth violence as well.
Absolutely. I'm really glad that you mentioned the youth violence, because that is something that I've been hearing about. Obviously, you're running for a state representative, which is representing all the demographics in District 25. But the thing specifically within the Somali demographics, there's been a lot of gang violence, youth violence. What kind of plans do you have in place to tackle that? Because it's a big concern for an immigrant community to deal with that to escape violence and then to deal with kind of violence here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think youth violence is one of the biggest factors that prompted me to run. So last year we've had over 10 homicides within the Somali community.
Oh my goodness.
Within Columbus, generally, we had about 143 homicides. That's just in Columbus in a period of a year. So I think it is becoming an epidemic, and I think it's being driven by guns. And so being able to do some level of gun control is absolutely essential. Okay. Recently, 2 state senators actually introduced a bill to do some gun control legislation. Okay. I would absolutely support that as a state legislator, so that we're controlling the accessibility of guns. Absolutely. So that they don't end up in the wrong hands. Okay. I think that's a start. I think the other thing we need to do is provide more job training for our youth, that we do more rehabilitation, so that we're not incarcerating our youth, but are providing needed programs and rehabilitation, so that they're able to get jobs and get out of that vicious cycle of violence. That's another key aspect of it as well. But also at the end, it comes down to just people talking to their families, elders, community leaders, mentors, being able to reach out to youth and saying, this is not the way of life, this is not sustainable, that you can do better. We will touch people. I was honored to have had high school coaches and high school teachers that were able to really channel my life in a positive way. And I think that I'm glad to be in a position where I can do that for youth that are coming up behind me. So I think it ultimately comes down to neighborhoods and people standing up and saying, we can do better, and reaching out to youth that are voiceless.
I'm glad that you mentioned speaking to the youth and reaching out to them and helping them with the things that they're going through, because they're going through a lot of changes as they're growing up. And sometimes there's a cultural barrier between themselves and their parents. What have you had that conversation, or have you ever initiated that conversation to bridge that barrier between parents and youth within the Somali community and the youth to kind of find some sort of common ground for this kind of issue?
Yeah, I did. So I was involved in a couple programs that did that exactly. Okay. So we had a community forum where we brought in some parents and some youth and talked about issues that are going on. Okay. Whether it's miscommunication, language barrier, whether it's just cultural differences, that some of the struggles youth are dealing with now are not problems that their parents dealt with back home in Somalia. So I think being able to talk publicly and to talk honestly about the issues that are going on is absolutely key, and it's a starting point, because to be able to solve an issue, you have to recognize and be aware that there is an issue. So I think recognition is the biggest thing, but going forward we need to do more community forums and be able to bring parents and youth together and say, there's a bridge. We need to come together. And I think having people like me, I'm fluent in Somali, alhamdulillah. So in a way that I'm able to talk to someone who's older, but at the same time I also speak English, so I can also connect with someone who's younger. So because I wasn't born here, I came here, so I'm aware of some of the cultural kind of nuances that some of the kids are not aware of. So I think it's good to have people to stand up and say, there's a huge gap here, we can do better, we can bring communities together.
One of the things that for voters within the community have been a little bit of a concern is your youth and your experience so far and wanting or actually running for a position like this. So what do you have to say about that?
So that's a good question. So I would say it's absolutely not a detriment. I am 25 years old, and I'm proud of that. But I think that I do get that often where some of the older people in my community and other communities would stand up and say, okay, you're really young, you're only 25. Like, how are you running? And I'm like, at what point, like, is there a specific age that you can run, or is there a limitation? No, there's not. I think the key thing that you have to have is passion, that you have to be able to understand what the issues are, and be able to be passionate enough to stand up and say, we're not doing this, these issues are going on, they're not being addressed, it's about time. So that's all it takes. You don't need to have a political background, you don't need to have a lot of money to be able to run. You have to simply be passionate and be able to listen to people from different communities, to be able to connect with different people. That's what I have. But I am young, and but I think that should be a bonus and not really a detriment, because I think in a way I'm not tied to the political establishment. I'm not, subservient to the political donor class, right? In a way, so it could be a plus where, I'm from that community. I understand some of the issues that are going on in District 25, and I don't have any ties to the political, the special interests or the political class. So it gives me a situation where I can directly listen to their concerns and bring that to the forefront of the State House.
What kind of law did you study?
I mostly focused on immigration law and criminal law, which are the two main areas that really impact the New American community. But currently I'm working with a law firm, it's Baker Hostetler, and I do a whole sorts of things, but that's primarily my main focus is immigration and criminal law, which is predominantly impacts our community, and it's definitely needed.
Was there interest in politics while you were studying law?
Yeah, so I've had an interest in politics going back to even high school, I would say, because I did political science as my degree in college. So I kind of knew that I was going to get into it. I wasn't sure whether I was going to be able to run, but I definitely knew that, I think politics and being politically engaged was going to be something that was going to be big in my life. So I, had that in my mind, but I did not know that I was going to be announcing for political office. But I definitely had that in me, and I think the more I became kind of connected to the community, the more some of the issues started to come up, and the more I kind of voiced my concerns about what was going on, they were not being addressed. I reached out to various different politicians, local politicians, and the concerns were, coming up pretty frequently and were not being addressed. So I felt that I'm a big believer in, communities being able to self-govern themselves, right? You don't need to, be subservient to someone who's outside of your community. You have to be able to represent your community. That's the, the definition of self-governance, is the idea that neighborhoods ought to be able to stand up and say, our issues are different from that neighborhood.
So that was like, I'll just do it myself, because nobody else is doing it.
Yes, I just did it. Even my own family didn't know. Like, I announced. I thought about announcing, and I reached out to my family after I've been wanting to announce, but it was something that I decided on my own after seeing some of the issues that were going on, and I felt that this was a void that I could fill.
Absolutely. All right. Could you tell us a little bit about your main focus in terms of legislation? Like, when you go in, what's the first couple of things that you intend to do, kind of actual changes do you plan on making?
Okay, so I would say the first absolute thing would be gun control. I think this bill has already been introduced. I would absolutely push for that pretty strongly, so that we're controlling access to guns that are heavily impacting minority communities. That's a big issue, I think. Another big issue is education reform. We need to be able to provide more funding to inner schools. My district is heavily minority, and our schools are pretty much failing because money is going to big corporations and the ultra rich, and they're getting tax abatements. Yet that money is not being invested in to build libraries, community centers, hire tutors, provide education to our youth. So I think rechanneling money would absolutely be a huge kind of goal that I want to be able to tackle as soon as I'm in, so that we're rechanneling a lot of money that are needed to communities that are actually in need, and not giving out tax breaks to the ultra rich who don't need it. So I think in a way I would be a best fit for that, because I don't have any ties to the political donor class. I don't have any, I'm not going to be giving them any special interests. So I think that I could definitely voice that concern at the State House.
Speaking of immigrant communities, something that also was a concern and that I've heard a lot about is fair housing. So there are members of the communities, minority communities, who are not fluent in the English language, who are seemingly being taken advantage of by landlords, or just by not having access to fair housing, or not being treated well when they have rented a place from somewhere, things just not working, maybe heat not working, maybe things in the apartments or homes not being fixed. Is this something that in your position you think you'll be able to address?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely we can. So I think landlord-tenant issues are pretty big in my campaign as well, because I think I've met with a lot of residents, a lot of tenants who have come to me concerned about a lot of issues that were going on, as far as their rights were not being protected, that some of the apartments they were living in were substandard, essentially, were not getting the repairs they needed, were infested with all sorts of issues that should not have been going on. So I think being able to really confront landlords and say, you have to provide sanitary housing.
Absolutely.
That's required by law. You can be prosecuted for not having it, and you can be fined for not providing that. So I think as an attorney myself, I have that authority, and I think that we ought to be able to push to make sure that landlords are doing everything they can to protect the rights of tenants, are providing safe, clean, sanitary housing. We also need to make sure that we're also adding affordable housing in our community. Columbus is going to be receiving a whole influx of people that are moving in. So providing affordable housing is absolutely critical. And I think that I would propose as a state lawmaker that we build housing with the caveat that certain percentage of this housing be designated for people from low-income housing, low-income issues. Because I think it's critical, because if you build a pretty large apartment complex, yet the rent is so high, no one from lower income classes can afford it. It would be pointless. So I think that any development that's going to be started, we should put policies in place to make sure that they do provide equal affordable housing to communities that don't have those kind of money.
One of the things that you mentioned was self-determination, and which is really important, and also like a national discussion, is people not relying on the state or the district for the basics, but actually going out there and getting themselves. What kind of opportunities, or in terms of job creation, or in terms of educational possibilities, would you as a legislator put in place for people to get that footing and just kind of have that access to move up in life rather than relying on the state or the district? So
absolutely, I think the greatest thing you can do for an individual is to actually empower them. Not just give them stuff, but actually empower them to be able to get whatever they want to. Right? There's a saying that says, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach a man how to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. Right? That same kind of metaphor translates here. So instead of just giving money to people, it's better to educate them and give them the skills and training they need to be able to help themselves. So I think providing job training, job skills, providing more funding to vocational and trade schools that provide actual training and skills that are needed in the workforce, not just general courses that you don't need. And I went to college, and I think it's one of the the impediments of going to college, because you're required to take GC courses, general education classes that you don't need, and yet it costs a lot of money, but those courses are not needed in your major. So I think we need to really do a pretty big education reform, so that we're really providing funds that are needed for skills and jobs that are needed in the 21st century, that are actually critical. And so I think job training, job skills, more funding for vocational trade schools, so that we're providing skills and training for people that are coming in, but also provide more funding for ESL courses and job training for new Americans that are coming in, who in addition to not having an education, have a language barrier.
Absolutely. In terms of education also, I've told you before, I'm a teacher, and I also went through college, but one of the also national discussions is tuition, or just the tuition for college just going up as time goes on, but the living wage not going up. I don't know really the extent of what state representative can do about that, but is there any educational reform in terms of college tuition that you could
So states can actually do that, absolutely. Okay. So I think the state of New York currently actually, recently passed a law, the governor signed it, basically essentially making it free for anyone to attend state colleges that are free of charge, colleges, like 4-year degrees. So we can do that as a state. We can also do is provide more trade schools and more vocational programs that are a lot quicker. Instead of going to college for 4 years, you go to a job training skills program where you get the skills you need, like a 6-month or 8-month program. You get the skills you need to get a job, and they'll help you get a job. I think that is becoming much more realistic for probably most Americans, right? College education being so expensive, and especially with debt and with student interest being so unrealistic going forward, and not being able to get a job, I think that is becoming a much more realistic program. And I think we ought to promote that more.
Yeah, I do agree, but also in a way, it's become nowadays that you need a bachelor's degree even for entry-level positions. So how do we...
Our definition of education is changing. Like back in like the 50s, you could have a high school diploma and support a family completely with a high school diploma. Now, even with a college degree, you're not really able to do that. You're required to go to graduate school and take out more loans.
To be more competitive.
I think, you know, whether it's worth it to go to college, that's a legitimate question anyone should ask themselves. You know, I'm definitely not going to tell anyone to not go to college because it's worked that great for me. But I think that we're forcing our kids to take on that burden of go to college, but you'll assume like a $50,000 debt. Yeah, it's not realistic.
And also deciding that at a really young age, like 18.
Yeah, exactly. It's a pretty big burden.
It is a pretty big burden. One of the things that I wanted to ask you was, what was the most defining moment in your life?
The most defining moment, I would say, is when my daughter was born. I think I'm a father, so I think being a parent is probably the greatest thing that could happen to anyone. I think another parent would understand that.
I agree.
So absolutely, like, best day of my life, I would say.
I would say so too. Yeah. I like that answer a lot. I am a parent, and that was the best day of my life too. Yeah. It's amazing. So who do you most admire in life, and why?
The most, I would say, likely would be probably my parents. I would say that's probably a pretty safe answer. That I really do look up to them. I really admire them. But I would say someone who's political, I would say probably Nelson Mandela would be someone that I truly do admire because of what he represented, what he stood for, and what he was able to accomplish, becoming an icon for the entire human race, essentially.
Wow.
And really, you know, kind of leaving a whole legacy. So I think being able to have that kind of an impact and really empower an entire generation of people that are looking up to you was pretty substantial.
What teacher in school made the most impact on you, and why?
It's been a while. I would say what teacher?
Even in college.
There's been a lot of in college. Okay.
Yeah, even in college.
Okay, in high school I can name Dr. Ridgway. She was my high school teacher. I know from high school. She was my physics teacher actually. She taught physics. Yeah, she did. She was really amazing. I mean, I was not a big fan of science, but I think the more I took physics, the more I was more interested. Because it's not really it's not the message, it's more the messenger. Yeah. As long as the teacher gives you that passion to learn, you kind of want to know more. Yeah. So I think she's someone that I really liked, and I really enjoyed her class, and I ended up taking more science courses as a result of her, and you know how great of a teacher she was. So I would say she was pretty big. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thought about medical school for a bit.
For a bit, you did? Okay, so what about, that's so funny though, Dr. Ridgway. I had a Dr. Ridgway also in college. Yours was in high school, mine was in college. He was my chemistry professor. Yeah, wow. If he's watching, hi Dr. Ridgway. I don't think so, but yeah, that's really cool. Just kind of going back to your run, your campaign. What has been the support in the community?
Yeah, it's been positive. It's been 100% positive, and I've announced my campaign now, I think 6 months ago. So we're getting a lot of traction, and we're getting a lot of support from everyone in District 25. We're getting a lot of support even outside the state. Okay. So because you know what I'm representing a lot more than just me. It's more an entire community that's voiceless. It's also kind of a defining moment in our country where, especially with what's going on with the president and some of the rhetoric that's coming from, you know, the administration, I think this is the moment where, you know, communities need to stand up and say, we can do better. He doesn't represent us. You know, we know our communities, and we're not gonna let someone else define us. We're gonna define ourselves. Absolutely. So I think it's that critical moment, and I'm proud to be in that position where I can speak up for that.
What do you want to leave us with tonight? What kind of message do you have, especially for the people in your district.
Yeah, so
and for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thank you, Ifrah, so much. And I would just end with, I'm really grateful to be in a position where, I do have a lot of burden on my shoulders, as being the first Somali to run an election in the state of Ohio. But I think that I'm honored to take on that burden because I feel that, it's more the needs of our community that are not there. Mm-hmm. It's more that it's that challenge that I'm standing up to. It's not only about me and what I want, but it's more that issue that I'm addressing and that the challenges of the community. Mm-hmm. I'm just a messenger. It's more the message that I'm kind of unloading. But I'm honored, very happy to be able to run. And I think just a couple of things. Election day is May 8th. Early voting starts April 10th. I think the last day to register is April 9th. So again, it's Ismail. I'm honored to have your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate you being here. Thank you very much, everyone else, for watching. Ismail is going to run this campaign, and I think he's going to do fantastic, and we're going to all wish him the best of luck, and we're going to support him, obviously. The things that he talks about is things that affect our country globally, nationally. Things like gun control, things like education reform, youth violence. There's just so many things going on, and we really do need to take a stand and reach out to our communities and actually have these honest, transparent conversations. So I'm really happy for the message that he has and the legislations that he wants to bring forth. Thank you guys for watching. Thanks for the support. Support Ismail on May 8th.